Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk, e-commerce architecture deep dive. My name is Tim, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this web conference through Teams live events, and audio can be heard through your device speakers. Today's web conference is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. By participating in this session using Microsoft Teams, your name, email address, phone number, and/or title may be viewable by other session participants. If you do not consent to being a part of a recorded session, please disconnect at this time. The recording will be available on the TechTalk's Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have questions for our presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the event, and if there is time at the end, we will address some additional questions. Thank you for your participation during these announcements and your patience. Now let's get started. Presenting for us today, we have from Microsoft, Brian Shook, Senior Program Manager, and Petri Simolin, Senior Program Manager. Brian, over to you.
Great, thank you, Tim. And thanks everyone for joining the session today, the e-commerce architecture deep dive. Again, my name is Brian Shook and I'm a Senior Program Manager with the Dynamics 365 Commerce team. And I'm going to kick us off today. So I'd like to start with looking at the agenda that we have for the session. We're going to start with the overall commerce architecture overview, review of how commerce works together. Then we'll deep dive into the e-commerce storefront, followed by the e-commerce rendering service. We'll then switch back to review how e-commerce elements are deployed in the system. And we'll then review the architecture of the CMS, which stores content and media files for the environment. Afterwards, we'll review the e-commerce site builder, which is used to build sites and author content. And finally, we'll finish with a look at the commerce scale unit with e-commerce, as well as some services such as ratings and reviews and the recommendation service. So with that, let's get started. So here you'll see a diagram of the architecture overview of commerce. You'll see there's a lot of options and flexibility based on the omnichannel design of the solution. Now, specifically with e-commerce, you have a headless commerce section of services to centralize your solution. Now, users interface with services such as F&O, point of sale or POS, e-commerce storefront, or the e-commerce site builder. To the left, you'll see back office, which is the backbone for the business storage and processing, and that is driven in e-commerce connected by the commerce scale unit. I'd like to call your attention, notice a lot of interaction up top through the e-commerce rendering service, which in turn connects with the commerce scale unit, ratings and reviews, and the CMS. Now, commerce also offers ratings and reviews, as we mentioned, the content management system to support content, image, video, and file management. And a lot of this is supplied with services within Microsoft, such as the Unified Data Services. You'll see Azure Data Lake Storage supplies the recommendation service below. And we also have Microsoft services such as Microsoft Bing for Commerce, which supports robust search within the commerce ecosystem. So we really want to start from the top in the e-commerce storefront and work our way down to drill in further to the architecture of these e-commerce components. And let's start there. The e-commerce storefront. So the e-commerce storefront is your e-commerce website. Now you, as a Dynamics 365 Commerce customer, own your domain through a DNS service. When e-commerce is provisioned, it in turn has an endpoint to serve the content you're authoring from the service. That endpoint can be used to access published content via the browser during the development phase. It serves up your previews in the browser. It also remains as an underlying endpoint for all your content. I'll note that when you're working in Site Builder and doing authoring actions, with the page instances, you'll see URLs with match paths. And these are paths that are relative to the base of the site you're working. And so those build on the endpoint from commerce that commerce supplies. But we'll also talk about how you match that up to your main domain when you go live with that domain. Now, one thing I'd like to call out, you'll see in the diagram multiple CDNs represented. Now, Commerce manages static content like JavaScript, CSS files, as well as the image and video delivery content. These CDNs integrate directly with the rendering and CMS services. Now, that's both for efficiency, and that's also built into the Commerce service itself. So that's owned within the ecosystem that's deployed. Now, the content distribution network, or the CDN you see in orange to the left near the end user, that serves up the direct content or the dynamic content, which is the HTML that's being authored. With that changing content, you have a few options how you'd like to serve that content through a CDN. Commerce itself offers a CDN that's built into the system as well, similar to the statics and the image and video CDN you see. Now that's an option. You can choose to use the built-in CDN for that HTML content. Or the other option is you can choose another Azure service like Azure Front Door, or an external CDN service to hook into. With your own Azure Front Door or an external CDN service, you get more flexibility, more strict rules that you can apply, things that are more specific to your environment. You own more of that content since you own that infrastructure. But if using the Commerce CDN, we'll work with you on a stage to set up the SSL certificate so that we can match to your domain. And that's typically a back and forth linear process of steps that we utilize with you. It will issue certificates, we'll provide things like the CNAME to the Commerce endpoint to upgrade into your DNS service. And then once you're ready to go live with your site, you'll switch the DNS to point to the Commerce endpoint, and that will make your site from the Commerce system go live. Now, one thing I like to remind is when we're coordinating that steps for a go live, it is good to set the DNS service to a 5-minute TTL. And that's if any changes need to occur back to an original endpoint, just assures there won't be much time in between both those sessions. Now from the storefront, let's dig a little deeper into the e-commerce rendering program. So again, the e-commerce rendering service compiles all the environment configurations. It's calling the CMS, the Commerce Scale Unit, as a robust service of controlled definition and components. And all that control wants to stabilize so that it renders HTML directly to your end users in a clean and regular fashion. The system is also designed to be highly customizable, and while maintaining that regularly released serviceable components. And we'll go through those here. Now, if you look at the diagram, we're noting a lot of the activity happens in the Node.js server that's provisioned when you provision your e-commerce environment. The rendering service here has a robust definitions interface, as well as page rendering rules, so that it knows how to interact with all the components that's being utilized in this environment. But side by side, you'll see the module library, as well as the customization library, because you have the ability as a customer to pull down packages with the elements we'll discuss and customize those to meet your needs for your site. Most are React or JavaScript components that can be authored regularly and help give you the UX that you may need for very specific modules within the system, or themes, or data actions. Now, modules themselves are small objects in the system. There's these JavaScript or React bytes that perform a function, usually UX-based. Those can be customized, as we mentioned, but the module library is released by Commerce to have some built-in items that you'll notice are regular or highly used modules. Themes are also defined in this layer, as you can define a theme to have style elements to give a look and feel to the content throughout your site. This affects things like positioning, text or font size. It can even be colors across the screen or layout options as well. And lastly, we do have the data actions that are built into the system, as well as items you can customize. And these are actions such as reviewing cookies, it can be calling a third-party service, or just performing a data call in the system itself. Now with the module library and the customization, we also have the Commerce runtime. Here you have the SDK that can pull down to give you guidance on how to develop within the system if you're customizing. We also include a TypeScript proxy, and this helps utilize some of the elements in the page to make it easier to code these different items. But also there's a benefit because the way that they're coded with some of the headers or structures within these elements make them surfaceable in the site building tool. And lastly, we have cooked in platform data actions that are robust, normalized actions that happen within this rendering service to compile a lot of these elements together and to output them. Now on the serving side, you see the rendering platform. This is also provisioned during your commerce provisioning. And it has things like a page controller to control the elements on the page that's being fed. It knows the definitions of all the items like the modules, themes, and data actions through the system. And these services offer secure preview service or WYSIWYG elements within the site builder tool. So these together, rendering will serve content securely and or publicly as needed and know how to cleanly supply all this content to your browser. So with that, let's give a little context to those elements as well on the page. So here we have our Fabricam demo site. And I wanted to touch base on here's a few modules that are just reaching into the commerce scale unit to get information. You'll see the navigational hierarchy, which is served from the commerce scale unit, as well as a module for the shopping cart, which can have a data action to show you if there's anything in the cart and surface that on the end page. Similar in this fashion, the sign-in link links to your configured identity provider, and that configuration is read through the commerce scale unit, and rendering knows how to direct you to the appropriate area for your sign-in. And we'll go in deeper in that in a moment as well. Lastly, we have the example of search. And in search, you have Bing for Commerce, which is in private preview currently. This is in flight with a few select customers. And Bing for Commerce enables organizations to achieve better conversions for their business via intelligent product discovery. It leverages Bing AI at scale, enabling user input or user intent to understand and leverage through the Bing knowledge graph. Now, I'd like to switch and look at an external service, and an important one is the identity provider, as your end users will need to authenticate if they have a customer record with you that has information attached to it. So this is different from a guest checkout customer, which has its own information, but this is a dedicated customer you want to track over time. And this element, such as the identity providers we offer, Azure AD B2C is a separate service, different from Azure AD, but in similar structure. This is a B2C service that is intended for end user authentication. And that's solely what we're using it for in the commerce infrastructure. This is just storing the username and password for that user in a record in the B2C tenant. That secure information is something that we store in the secure B2C tenant, but all the customer information outside of that is stored in the dynamic system with the customer record. So we'll take a quick look at what's involved in this type of setup for the architecture itself. You'd have an admin that comes in and configures both the site builder and the commerce scale unit or HQ with the information for your identity provider. In this case, they will provision a B2C tenant and a B2C application in the Azure portal, and that links back to the e-commerce storefront. Now, when your end user comes to sign in, when they click the link, they're redirected to the B2C pages. Now, these are secure pages hosted in the B2C domain, but the pages themselves can be authored in our site builder tool to get a customized feel. Once the user authenticates, they're redirected back to where they came from the storefront and can go forward with their activity. I want to look at that in a slightly different swim lane compatibility, but also note AAD B2C offers local accounts for sign-in, but they also offer social identity providers like Facebook or Google, so you can have users log in with those methods. All of these link back to a customer record in Dynamics, which we link the association. And let's take a look at how that process happens. Again, when an end user comes to the e-commerce storefront, they're redirected to the B2C tenant. They go through the sign-up process, and upon a successful sign-up, they're confirmed to be authenticated and redirected back to the rendering service. Now, when they're back in the e-commerce site, rendering knows to check against the commerce scale unit and enter that information. It's carrying the token through from that authentication, and now the commerce scale unit creates a new customer record. That in turn gets synced back to your HQ so that you have a thorough customer record throughout the entire stack. The linking happens automatically and is tracked of the record in B2C linking back to the customer number that was created. Now, a similar external service I'd like to review is the payment flows. Again, as a customer, you would have an option to go choose an external payment provider and hook that into the commerce environment. This stores the secure customer credit card information in the payment provider, which is built for that security. And then we have reference back to the commerce site to know how to replicate that against the customer itself. So again, we'll take a look at how that operation handles. To set up, the Dynamics admin sets up the payment provider in HQ. Here the configurations match, but the payment provider has a payment gateway that is live, and that will be accessed through the site or the call center, which is a similar process. Now, when an end user or a call center agent enters either the cart checkout page or is in the call center in HQ and looking at the customer profile, if they need to add credit card information, the checkout page will offer a module for rendering an iframe to that payment connector. Now with the iframe, the user is able to enter their information directly into the payment provider. And as they process that checkout, a token is created linking that customer, but with an obscure customer number or record, and associating back to the customer in HQ. Once HQ begins to process this item, it knows with the obscure information it sends to the payment gateway to see if the payment is authorized, and then it connects back to replicate that against the customer, saying the authorization has occurred. And again, here, no sensitive information has actually hit commerce, and it's all stored in the payment provider for security. With that, we'll take a step back and look at deploying e-commerce environment. And for that, I'll hand it over to Petri. Petri,
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, Brian. For the audience, my name is Petri Simolin, and I'm a senior program manager on the Dynamics 365 Commerce team. And like Brian mentioned, I will be talking a bit about deploying the e-commerce environments before I begin on the content management system. The e-commerce environments are initialized and managed from the LCS portal. That's the Lifecycle Services portal at lcs.dynamics.com, which you probably already are familiar with. Commerce Scale Unit has to be deployed before e-commerce can be initialized. E-commerce environments integrate with the Commerce Scale Units for omnichannel configuration information and product information, etc. E-commerce environment management happens from the e-commerce tab from the Environment Features Management view. Environment Features Management view can be accessed from the Environment Details page by clicking the Manage link under the Environment Features. Then proceeding to the e-commerce tab. It's the same place where Commerce Scale Units are managed. And I actually have a partial screenshot there on the slide where you can see the links that you need to navigate to in order to get to the e-commerce initialization and management. Before e-commerce initialization can begin, the following information is required from the user. E-commerce environment friendly name needs to be unique and it will not be visible to the end users. Supported hosts, which are essentially virtual host names that are associated with this environment. No domains are reserved based on this information or any similar technical actions taken. Environment can also be accessed using the generated host names that are generated based on the environment friendly name. And one important piece of information that is requested at this point is the primary geography. And by default, the optimal geography is selected based on the region of the CSU. Since the CSU and the e-commerce environment interact and integrate with each other and communicate heavily, the optimum region is selected, optimum geography is selected by default. And this will be the primary read and write geography. Multiple read geographies with automatic replication are supported, but initializing those configurations require assistance from Microsoft. And it will be available as self-serve at some point. Another piece of information requested at this point before initialization can begin is the AAD security group for e-commerce administrators. This information can be modified later through the site builder. Groups can be removed, groups can be added. Ratings and reviews, whether it will be provisioned for this environment or not, that information is also asked at this point. If ratings and reviews is provisioned, AAD security group needs to be selected for moderators of ratings and reviews. And when the e-commerce environment is initialized, it comes with the module library. It used to be called Store Starter Kit, if you are familiar with that term. And module library comes with a set of out-of-the-box modules and a functioning Fabricam demo site. From the diagram at the bottom of this slide, you can see the relationships between different LCS and e-commerce concepts. You can see that everything starts from LCS project, environments are gated in projects, CSUs, commerce scale units are deployed for the environment, e-commerce environment is initialized and associated with the commerce scale unit, and e-commerce environments can host multiple sites, which in turn can have multiple channels. And by channels here, we mean the e-commerce channels that are defined in the site builder and associated with the HQ Online channels. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then let's talk a bit about the content management system. Dynamics 365 Commerce e-commerce is provisioned with a full-blown headless content management system. The CMS is used to organize content for the site authoring and storing digital assets such as images, videos, and also other binaries such as PDFs and Office documents. I believe as of today, over 170 file types are supported in the media library in the CMS. The CMS itself is an indexed document library with lifecycle and state management, strict data types with referential integrity enforcement, data replication, change tracking for team collaboration. It's built for volume and supports billion+ requests per day and thousands of requests per second. Scalable, supports millions of content items in multiple Azure regions. And it's also optimized for low latency reads for published data and has multiple layers of caching, local and distributed. It also supports role-based access control, which I believe Brian will be covering in more detail a bit later. CMS also utilizes multiple types of cloud storage backends, trying to optimize for the content type in question. More about them a little bit later. Image resizer service, that's an important service in the CMS, which I want to highlight here. It provides on-the-fly image transformation and manipulation operations with caching. It enables the breakpoints that the site supports and allows quick modifications of image parameters and allows the content creators to upload a single high-resolution version of the image, and all the other image versions required for responsiveness are then downscaled from that high-resolution source image. The site builder and other e-commerce services and tools leverage the CMS for managing their content. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. You can see a block diagram here It's not exhaustive. It's a simplified view. I will be talking about the different columns and different blocks here. The content management system is a multi-tenant software as a service solution. It has a modular service architecture, similar to microservices. Services can be modified and deployed individually without the public endpoint changing, and in most cases without any disruption to the service. In the block diagram on the right side, you can see examples of services leveraging the CMS. On the top, we have the site builder, and I know that Brian will talk a bit more about site builder later in the session, but the site builder is basically the interface for content authors to create and manage content, kind of a UX for the CMS and CSU, if you will. Next, we have the e-commerce storefront, the actual site. We have e-commerce services such as sitemap generation and other similar services. And we do have the point of sale, which can be configured to consume product images from the CMS, which gives us the omnichannel image backend feature. Both e-commerce and point of sale can use the same product images from the media library of the site builder. Management operations will have to be done only once in single location for those images. Moving on to the next column. In the CMS public endpoints column, you can see examples of endpoints exposed on the CMS that the services use to manage content stored in the CMS. Business APIs expose multiple APIs for managing assets, content, and content types in the CMS. And all the operations that can be done using the site builder, they go through the business APIs. Image resizer is the endpoint which we talked a bit earlier. It's used for serving all the published images and preview images for authenticated content authors directly from the CMS. In whatever format, dimensions, aspect ratio, focal point, etc. is required, on-the-fly transformations and image manipulation with caching is provided by image resizer. And then on the left side, we can see, like I said, simplified view to the CMS internals. This is not exhaustive view by any means. It's just there to give you an example of the modular architecture. System APIs allow low-level document-level access to the content, and these system APIs are heavily used by the business APIs. Content indexing and search-related services are used by the site builder to allow content discovery for the content editors. And media processors perform post-ingestion operations like metadata population, image dimensions to mention an example. Automatic image asset tagging based on image analysis is something we have ready and will be releasing fairly soon. Overall, CMS consists of 20+ internal services that take care of various tasks like content invalidation when new version is published or content is unpublished. There's health service, which monitors the health of the system and provides that information to the other services depending on the CMS in the product. And then if we move to the leftmost column, you see some technologies that the CMS leverages behind the scenes. There's Azure Cosmos DB for regular content. There's Azure Storage for very large content and binary data. And there's Azure Media Services for video content. Elasticsearch is there for indexing and search. And like mentioned, these are just examples, and the diagram is not exhaustive by any means. The services leveraged behind the scenes can change as new services become available. And the CMS always tries to leverage the latest and greatest best fit cloud services depending on the content type and expected operations. The customers will not need to license these technologies, internal technologies of the CMS separately, but the costs are baked into the license costs. Next slide, please. Thank you. I mentioned earlier, a media library is a section of the site builder tool, which heavily utilizes the media managing capabilities of the CMS. You can see the screenshot of the interface on the right side there on the slide. The media library allows easily managing all the digital assets of your site. You can perform operations like image uploads, modifications, publishing, unpublishing, binary replacement, deletion, etc. It supports searching for assets and allows filtering based on when the asset was last modified or who ingested it, to mention a couple of filtering options. And it also allows metadata management of different asset types. It supports focal point, definition, and crop region editing. They are mostly used for overrides, since the automated selections typically work out just fine. And there's one last thing I would like to mention about the media library, and that is the omnichannel image backend capability, which I already mentioned earlier. And it means that you can use this media library as the one master location for your product images and leverage the same images in point of sale systems system as well. And this allows any image management operations to be performed in a single location and only once, and all the channels using the images will get the changes. And next, I believe Brian will talk a bit more about the e-commerce site builder. Go ahead, Brian.
Great, thank you, Petri. Yes, and thanks. We'll now talk about the e-commerce site builder, which after looking at the CMS and all the capability it holds, the site builder is the web portal used to manipulate that content to author your sites and the content within the sites. So I wanted to highlight that the employees of your company are utilizing Site Builder. As they log into the portal, Petri had mentioned when you deploy, you have a security group that's tied to the AAD that's associated to your environment. And that's a big point I want to highlight. And we'll look at roles in a bit of how we perform the role-based access control. But being a member of that AAD security group and being authenticated through that Azure Active Directory allows you access to the portal to start authoring content. And that's to make sure that outside users can't see your content until you're ready for them to. Now I've highlighted both the end user in a public sense as well as the employee to kind of show the separation of how they do approach the content. So as we reviewed in rendering, you have the normal CDN and the static CDNs that rendering pushes to those endpoints for your user consumption. Now the e-commerce rendering is still working with Site Builder, but through the Site Builder services. And you'll see mainly that Site Builder services are connecting to CMS because that's where you're doing most of the actions for this activity. But in lieu of that, rendering still filters in all the additional information that may be needed as you look and preview your content within Site Builder. And that's where a lot of the good functionality comes in. As you build your content, you can see what you're working on, see how it may perform in a browser, and preview it live in a browser as well. Now, if you'll notice, there's actually a separate secured cache CDN that's feeding that content to the employee who is authenticated. And again, that goes in towards the different states of activity as you're authoring that content. We have a draft version of content that you can check out and work on. You can have employees within your site that have access, also working on content as well. Content can be locked, manipulated, and then released from edit. And that makes sure that you're not in a race condition with other employees working on the same content. But importantly, as you hit publish, now that content is public on the public-facing URL that is provisioned by Commerce. Now that may not mean that the domain is pointing to the content because we have the domain switchover we mentioned with the CDN stage for the storefront slide. But that capability is there to view that content in a browser on a live web site. So secondly, I did want to notice too that there are a lot of capabilities coming through, so you can see when you look into the WYSIWYG module, not only the modules you're working with, and we'll take a closer look at that, but also that they're being fed that information that comes from these additional services within Commerce. So it really gives the full effect as you're trying to edit your content and push it live. Let's touch quickly though on that role-based access control. Now we've simplified the roles in Commerce because there's only a few that we find are needed at the moment. And that's how you interact with the system. So Petri mentioned on deployment, you'll have a system administrator security group in AAD that you provide. And that should be a minimized set of users in that security group that have access to do everything across the environment. So within that Commerce environment, they can create sites, they can leverage the configurations for the different sites, and they can do different things within Site Builder, like opening different menus, seeing different configurations, as we mentioned. And so there's a lot more capability at that level. Now we have some of these roles replicated at that environment level, but starting with the administrator role and down to reader, those also can be minimized to a site specifically. So if you have a sub-team that's working on site A and a different sub-team working at site B, you can actually control access to that content by use of different security groups through the tooling. Now, an administrator are users who have roles and privileges to do things within the tool that work against the site structure itself, can create templates, layouts, and things that we'll take a look at quickly. But those configurations give you more control in how you're operating your site. And we also have the web producer role. And this is a role for users who can create pages, create content fragments, and templates. They are uploading and managing assets in the CMS, and they can even build off of the tempered product pages that we have within the system to give them additional marketing content if needed. And we do that similarly with category pages as well. So the web producer really is creating the look and feel of the content, and they have the ability to do that throughout the Site Builder tool. Lastly, we have a reader role. That role is just for users who need to view pages only, but they may not interact or change the content with them. So you can think of this as maybe approvers, people who are weighing in on what's been built, but they're not doing the actual building and design. Lastly, upon environment provisioning, Petri mentioned the R&R or ratings and review moderator role, and that security group is used in that part of the tool, which we'll take a look at later. So with those roles, let's look a little bit about the content structuring of the content from the CMS and the modules that we mentioned earlier throughout the system. And in a development phase of a page itself, typically you're starting with a template. And that's really just a framework of what types of modules can go into specific slots within the system. This can build to use fragments, lock different capabilities so that they're continuous across all pages in the site, or give some flexibility within a slot to say that multiple modules can be used, and it's at the choice of the web designer or web producer. From the template layer, we have the layout layer, which actually zones in more specifically with the template and picks specific modules for those different areas. So within a few slots, you can say maybe 3 modules are allowed with the template, but I'm selecting one that needs to go forward for a certain type of page that I want across my site. We then have the page instance itself, and that's where you do the real content work. That's where you're typing in the content, adding specific images, configuring the module to display how you want it to on that page itself. And so that gives a lot of flexibility, but all these items combined throughout the CMS system, which is tracking all these different iterations of your content, now comes securely to the rendering platform that renders this page as we discussed earlier. And that gives you a lot of scalability and flexibility in how you use content. You don't have to rebuild things over and over, so that's a great time efficiency. And to give context as well, let's just take a deeper look at the authoring tool. Just show a quick frame of the layout of the tool. And here you'll see some of those different elements in the menu that you can operate against, like the layouts, templates, the page instances. Now there's more capabilities that we'll discuss in another talk about Site Builder and all how you author content throughout the system. But I did want to highlight, you can see the tree frame in the middle here of the portal view. And again, that's compiling some of those modules we talked about earlier. And those modules have set data actions, and themes can also be applied against all these sites. So it brings all these elements together when you're doing the content authoring. Now, furthermore, you see the WYSIWYG panel, which you can interact with as well. And again, that is reflecting the page content so that you know which components, how they will be expressed, and you can interact against either the tree view or the WYSIWYG to make further edits. Again, this page layout or this page instance is following a layout, which also came from a template. So again, you have that substructure and other substructure backing all these elements through. And you can also see that rendering is at work here in the Site Builder tool. You see the navigation hierarchy is rendering, so it's still getting the commerce scale unit information and pulling it through. Now with that, it's a good segue to look at the commerce scale unit. Again, the commerce scale unit drives all the main business logic for commerce in the e-commerce site. It's attaching back to headquarters, and it acts as your local headless instance of the data sets you need and the logic in commerce that you're interacting against. This is everything from products, categories, navigation hierarchies, pricing, sales info, order info, a long list of elements that go through piping back to your HQ instance, but also represented in your channel database. The commerce scale unit includes the OData endpoints, which allow connecting services to interact. And that's actually how a lot of internal services connect as well as service-to-service connections. You'll notice the commerce runtime is at play within the commerce scale unit. That's interacting against all the data in the channels, making sure they're flowing back to and from HQ as needed. Again, I'll iterate the e-commerce, the commerce scale unit is the main business logic in store specifically for your online store. A site can link to multiple channels that are hosted within the commerce scale unit. And again, I think Petri iterated this as well, but multiple channels and sites can be managed within a single commerce scale unit. And with that, let's take an additional look at some of the external services within the headless commerce area. So here we have the ratings and review services. And this is another omnichannel service that can support not only your e-commerce site, but call center and point of sale also. The e-commerce rendering service surfaces the ratings and reviews in the e-commerce website, coordinating with the product data back to HQ. You'll notice it's a low latency, it's operating against Delta data, pulling product information back and forth from Dynamics headquarters. And that happens at a very high rate, so you get low latency and good responses as users are inputting their data. We do check against to make sure that the users who are inputting reviews are authenticated users. So it's not open to the general public to leave any comment they want against your products. Within the Site Builder portal that we've talked about, you also have that ratings and review moderator panel. And again, this links back to that R&R, ratings and review moderator security group in your AADJ. So those users can actually go to the portal of Site Builder and look at different trends about the reviews that are being left. And this is helpful if you want to monitor the different elements on specific products, maybe sale information, or you just want to highlight certain products you're wanting to watch how those reviews play out. But importantly, reviews help convert sales as they give consumers confidence in the products that you're selling. So with the moderator tool itself, you also have the ability to take down reviews if they don't meet the guidelines of your business rules. So this could be negative content or information that is not pertinent for the review itself. You can think of just normal commentary or something that may not really work to the degree of what you want at the review level. But also you can respond directly to users' reviews to provide them additional information or help if needed. And that's a helpful tool in staying connected and communicative with your customers themselves. Now again, we noticed that e-commerce rendering is compiling the data from the ratings and review service, which it securely connects to. And you'll see that surfaced across the different types of elements, like a product page, or even in sub lists with the products listed, you can see reviews underneath if the module is built. And that is a default module in our module library, which you can see in our normal themes package as well. So again, a high-end tool with a built-in capability. This is an option to choose when you're deploying your commerce instance for e-commerce. I'd also like to look at the recommendations engine. So with recommendations, you have a large set of machine learning or active integration of information that you can pipe to your users. We'll see in the architecture model here that data is stored in HQ, which is also pushed and stored securely in Azure Data Lake storage. And that's where the recommendation service connects and processes that information. The customer data is exclusively used to train the machine learning models and power these recommendations. Now, we ship with a few out-of-box generic recommendation lists. These are things like new arrivals, best-selling or trending lists. So they're curated lists that recommendations knows how to utilize based on metadata of the products themselves. But there's also machine learning-based recommendations lists. And that's things like people also like or frequently bought together. Additionally, with the customer information, if they've opted in, you can have personalized recommendations with something like the Picks for You list. Now, these are all, again, out-of-the-box generic recommendations lists that come with the service themselves. But if there are additional needs for additional lists, that's something our recommendations team can work to help comply with and look at further. And through these data lists, again, you can drive conversions of your products by helping get the right list of products to your customer, given the context of what they're searching through. There's a number of common scenarios employed by customers to include driving discovery of the category pages or new arrivals, trending, or best-selling. So it's definitely something to take a look at. And this is an additional service that you provision or choose to provision when you're provisioning commerce. So with that, I wanted to take us back to the architecture overview, as we covered a lot of different moving pieces. But I just want to review quickly what we went through. In the areas of this talk, we started with the e-commerce storefront and saw how that integrates with the commerce endpoints and the CDN usage. We reviewed the architecture of the e-commerce rendering service. And then we looked at deploying from LCS, which initiates the environment instances of these main e-commerce services. We then dove into the CMS and the digital asset management capabilities. Then we looked at how e-commerce site builder is used to author content. We reviewed the commerce scale unit, the ratings and reviews service, and the recommendation services within this overall environment. With that, we thank you for joining us and going through this process. I think if we have time, I'll hand it back over to Tim, and we can see if we can answer and address any questions.
Thank you, Brian. We would like to get your feedback on today's session. I have posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We value your feedback and welcome any input on how we did today and what you would like to see in future sessions. The survey scores on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest score possible. Thank you for your participation. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the TechTalk's Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. I'd like to once again extend a big thank you to our presenters, as well as our audience for joining us today. Please stay safe, and we hope you enjoy the remainder of the day.
Thank you. Before we cut out, Rob, did you have any other questions that came up?
I do. I've got 2 questions, and they're both around licensing. So instead of typing them out, I'll just go ahead and ask. From an overall service perspective, we talked a lot about the services within the commerce stack. Which services are included with e-com, and which services have their own licenses?
Great, thank you, Rob. That's a good question. Yeah, for the main e-commerce bundle, when you license e-commerce, you get a lot of the CMS capability, the internal CDNs that we mentioned for the video, images, and statics, and the Cosmos DB and some of the other additional underlying technologies there. To call out specifically, there are separate licenses for ratings and reviews and recommendations. And then additional costs from there just varies on the options of your configuration. For example, if you're using an external CDN or your own subscription of the Azure Front Door service, things of that nature come into play as costs. But there's more information on our website, and I encourage folks to go to that endpoint to look.
And the second question is, it's more around extensibility. Where can I go? What documentation is available for us to better understand how we can customize and configure commerce?
That's also a great question. Yeah, we do have a few documents out there. I think I will add them to our presentation documentation as an additional resource. And so we'll have those links included so you can go and learn different areas to go customize.
All right, thank you. If there are no other questions, I once again thank everyone for coming today, and this concludes today's event.